Bernstein, the Director of Editorial Content at MarketingSherpa, and we are here live from IRCE, the world's largest e-commerce event, to talk about the latest information from our benchmark study. We want you to join us. You can ask questions, you can tell us what you've learned in your own e-commerce practice at #SherpaWebinar. Let me introduce who I have with me today. We have Ben Pressley, the Head of Worldwide Sales at Magento. Ben, thanks for joining us today.
Great to be here.
So I look forward to hearing what you've learned from customers over the past year. About how many customers do you think you've talked to all over the world?
So Magento has seen continued growth globally. I mean, we're in 40 or 50 countries at this point. So in the last 12 months, I would say we've talked to hundreds of customers from all corners of the globe, all shapes and sizes. And so we're excited to be here and talk some about what we're seeing.
Great, we're going to learn from Ben's experience there. We also have Pete Prestipino, the Editor-in-Chief of Website Magazine. Thanks for joining us, Pete.
Thank you.
And likewise, how many marketers are you talking to just here at IRCE?
We talk to 140,000 in our monthly magazine, but we're talking to as many people as we can about some really interesting technologies, many of which I hope we'll be able to share in this webinar.
Excellent. So, as I said, we are live here at IRCE, and we are broadcasting from our media center. We have this live webinar, but we're also going to be interviewing lots of different e-commerce marketers. In fact, we have some of those available right now to you, along with these related resources. You can learn more about the benchmark study and some of our case studies. And you can download that e-commerce benchmark study. It's a free download. It's at marketingsherpa.com/ecom. We're going to be talking about the data from there today. This was a 9-month effort. We conducted benchmark survey with more than 4,000 e-commerce marketing professionals. And what we did is we turned that into 25 core e-commerce questions that e-commerce marketers might want to know about. We have 94 charts to answer those questions, and this was made possible thanks to research funding from Magento. Ben, why was Magento interested in learning more about what is successful for e-commerce marketers?
Well, so as I alluded to before, Magento has, over the last couple of years, become the worldwide market share leader among all e-commerce platforms. Roughly 30% of all web stores run on Magento today, and they span from small, non-transactional shops to customers who are doing hundreds of millions of dollars in annual online revenues. We gain lots of insights in our interactions with our customers, but we also want to invest in thought leadership and analysis in the market to go back to our customers and be able to provide them with more insights that will help them grow their business as best as possible.
Excellent, and as I said, it's a free download. We've got 94 charts there. You can find that at marketingsherpa.com/ecom, E-C-O-M-N. Like I said, we're here at the Marketing Sherpa Media Center at IRCE, conducting lots of interviews with all of the different marketers here. You can see those at marketingsherpa.com/IRCE. You can also see a live stream right now of this very webinar if you go there. With that, let's jump into this. We broke this down into a few key challenge questions. One was around conversion rate optimization, and we wanted to know how e-commerce companies can increase their conversion rates and what their current conversion rates are. So if we look at this chart, I think many e-commerce companies are going to find it reassuring. We found that most conversion rates fall below 5%. So that's what, when we're talking about conversion rates, we're talking about final conversion to sale. But as we were talking about, Ben, we don't want to look at that as either a ceiling or a floor, right? I mean, this is just what we're finding from other e-commerce companies. Doesn't mean that you should necessarily look at this and say, oh, I can only get this specific number and settle for it.
Yeah, it's a great point, and we see this a lot in the industry that on the one hand, you do want benchmarks. You want to know what other companies are doing, other merchants are doing, and we consistently see that conversion rates are in the 2 to 5% as an industry standard. At the same time, you don't want to fall into the trap of thinking, okay, I'm in that 2 to 5% range, so I must be doing fine or I must be doing well. In reality, every e-commerce business is unique, and there are some pretty simple things that we see that a lot of merchants can do in order to really ramp up their conversion rates. I'll go through a couple of them. And one of the biggest things that we see is that merchants haven't invested enough in building a really engaging design for their website, a really engaging user experience. One of my favorite notes from a Forrester report recently was that the only sustainable advantage that companies will have is a deep understanding of their customers and a deep ability to engage them. And if you're not creating a really engaging experience at your site, that's going to impact conversion. Beyond that, there are some simpler things that I think companies can do that we see very often. One is not having an optimized tablet and mobile experience. You think about it, when you're sitting there at night watching whatever your television show is, you've got your tablet, and you have to pinch and scroll and zoom in order to follow or look at a particular website, that obviously is going to impact conversion. And a great example of this is a company based out of the UK called Smythson. Smythson was the original manufacturer of the pocket diary, the daily planner, if you will, 120 years ago. And today has lots of fantastic leather goods. Smythson decided to do a mobile-first strategy. They understood that their customers were primarily interacting with them on tablet and on mobile. And so they started there, then built up to larger screens, if you will, from there, and had tremendous success. So companies who take the time to understand their customers and where mobile is applicable, really optimize the experience there, we see tremendous results. In the case of Smythson, over 100% increase in conversion just from doing it.
And Pete, I want to ask in just a moment about how you've seen design affect conversion, but I have a similar tale to tell. I was interviewing REI at Email Summit, and they were very interested in getting into responsive design and mobile and reaching out to their customers. Well, they did it for the inbound channel, but not the website. So they had this great email that was perfect for mobile, everyone read it on mobile. They click through, they'd end up at this landing page with 600 products, 6,000 products, totally not optimized for mobile conversion. So you also have to think through, as you said, the design of the website. Don't just think part of the funnel, just email or whatever, but how are you actually going to walk customers through that journey and they don't actually get derailed to an experience that isn't optimized for mobile. What have you seen with design affecting conversion?
Design is obviously one of the most important elements to conversion, but I think it really kind of should go a step beyond that in terms of, or maybe preceding that, where I think the misalignment of a marketing and advertising strategy to the individual product page is an absolute killer when it comes to conversion. So if that page is not specific to the ad that's being displayed or the message that's being displayed, be it on social or email, that conversion rate's going to plummet, and it's going to be a real problem, and it's going to skew the conversion rate that you understand your website has. I'd also advise the webinar attendees to consider a per product conversion rate understanding as opposed to a site-wide, because there's going to be some winners and losers in products. So what you want to do is understand what products are selling best and group them in a way where you know that these pages are optimized, and kind of take those that aren't fully maximizing the user experience and modify them, optimize them, and ultimately you'll take those pages to a higher conversion rate as well. So design, obviously important. I would say the alignment of your marketing and advertising to the individual product page is very important, and to really nail down some specifics on per product conversion rate, which I think is a really good opportunity to grow.
And you mentioned that you need to look at the entirety of the funnel and the different touch points that are there. I think that's a great point, because we see customers who are now moving into the world of optimizing, doing responsive email in addition to their own sites. These sorts of things really make a huge difference in the conversion rates.
So you mentioned a per product conversion. We have a question here from James. Should tablet conversion rates be the same as desktop? So I'll tell you what I've seen. We might want to look at a per device conversion rate too. So what we've seen a lot is, while customers are engaged with mobile, and again, as you said, Ben, depends on the product, it depends on what you're actually selling. So while customers are engaging with mobile, a lot of times they're browsing on mobile and shopping and wait until they actually get to the desktop to convert. So I was interviewing Fathead here at the MarketingSherpa Media Center at IRCE earlier. They found the same thing. The traffic was over half the traffic was coming from a mobile device of some sort, but the conversion rates were much lower. I don't know if either of you have similar experience.
Well, drawing on the eBay experience, what eBay from its marketplaces business sees is a lot of shopping during the day on mobile and on laptop or desktop, people at work, right, on the subway or wherever you are, and then at night seeing increased conversion rates on tablet. So I think a lot of it ends up depending on the business that you have and understanding who your users are and how they're interacting with you.
So we have another question here from Bob. He says, I don't have the budget for a responsive website. Would a mobile website be my next best choice for my e-commerce site? And it's funny, we're going to see later when we look at some of the other challenges, budget is definitely a challenge for many marketers. I wonder if you two had any thoughts on that, but I'll say one thing I've seen with that is really things like responsive design. I mean, these are different tools, and I think as we were talking earlier, Pete, the overall strategy is what you have to look at. How are you going to serve customers? What's the best way to get to customers and serve them? And you can start trying different things on mobile and testing it. So I don't know if you've...
I think you could go right now either way, and I think a budget is going to play a huge role for most merchants. Whether they're just startups or they're really established IR 500 companies. I think you can go either way. I think there are advantages and disadvantages to both. I think responsive provides some opportunities. It also has some drawbacks if it's not implemented correctly. So you have to be very careful in this decision-making process. I think if you wanted to play it safe and kind of future-proof your e-commerce business, responsive is probably a really safe bet. If you have, maybe a limited set of SKUs, a limited set of products, I think, if it's manageable, you could probably go to a dedicated mobile site and be very confident in its ability to convert users. And I think that's really the ultimate aim anyway. So whatever's best for the user, and tracking and tracking down to the product level and down to the device level is going to be the best kind of course of action.
Again, going back to that quote in the beginning, sustainable advantage is understanding your customers and deeply engaging with them. So the key question is, who's your customer? What do they want? Build around that. Now I think the good news is for a lot of merchants, the technology is catching up with the needs of the merchant, and the price point is coming down. So a lot of e-commerce platforms, certainly Magento, include the ability to do a lot of adaptive web design for mobile, essentially out of the box as you're building your general e-commerce site for the primary form factor. So that's nice, and at least will scale to the appropriate size of whatever device the merchant is looking at. But going back to what we said, if you know that your primary target audience wants to engage with you on a tablet, then you better build a great experience on a tablet. And responsive is the way to do that. And it's not just the technology, as you were alluding to. It's starting to curate the experience. What products am I going to put on this smaller form factor in order to ensure they have an optimal experience with your brand?
Yeah, it's a great point. Going back to that Fathead interview earlier, the reason they went to responsive design is it was the answer, right? It wasn't the question. They started with looking at the personas of who's visiting their site, why are they visiting their site, then they went to, okay, what devices will they experience it on, and then they ultimately came up with that answer.
Sort of reverse engineering the experience, right? I think that's a lot of value in doing so.
Exactly. But then you talk about learning about your customers, and one way we can do that is through conversion optimization and testing. I want to share briefly a test we ran on Marketing Experiments before. It's also a great way to improve your conversion rates. This was a newspaper, and this was right by the final conversion. They were testing what is the best way, the highest revenue way to present price and to present the different offerings they had. So they tried with popularity, most popular to least popular. They tried with price, low price to high price. And they also tried with price, high to low price. What they found overall is the low to high price, they got a 20% increase in revenue per visit. So really 2 lessons from that. Not saying that works for every company, but from that testing, it's another way you can learn about your customer. And also, we're talking about a relatively easy change, just changing how you are presenting your price and presenting your offerings to your customer that can ultimately increase that conversion rate that we're looking at. So I wanted to get into testing and talk about how testing impacts campaigns. And as you can see from the data, we found that the companies that test changes based on extensive historical data, right? So that means they test, they learn something, and then based on what they learn, they're testing again to continue learning about their customer. They had the overall highest conversion rate. So Ben, what's your view on testing?
So e-commerce as a digital channel is highly measurable. But what's interesting, because e-commerce is so much about experience and feel, emotional engagement, a lot of the decisions about e-commerce also end up being made based on feel, emotion, gut sort of instinct. And that's fine to an extent, but it is, in our experience, better to go with the science. What is measurable is is there, and you should use that where possible. One story along these lines comes to mind from Smartwool, a division of VF Corp, great company. One of our partners, Blue Acorn, was working with Smartwool, and they were looking at how their product categories were structured, and said, this is interesting, why did you do it that way? And they said, we just kind of liked it that way. Okay, great. Why don't we do a little bit of A/B testing here? We're just going to do a standard format for that versus yours. 28% conversion rate improvement just by moving to the standard. That's a 28% increase in revenue. I mean, that's amazing just by doing a little bit of A/B testing, and in this regard, going a little bit away from what was the gut instinct and going with the data. So we see time and again great examples where the data really is the pathway to better success.
And the real value in that, like you talk about that 28% conversion increase, think about what we do as marketers often. We're spending so much money driving traffic to that site, right? Whether it's from a print ad, from a pay-per-click ad, email, social media. So when you get that 28% increase, it's an increase on that entire marketing investment. So I see often in website magazine, Pete, you write about landing page optimization, conversion rate optimization, testing.
Yeah. It's one of those, what we believe testing and landing page optimization specifically is an ongoing process. So it's not something that you can set aside a period of time to test. There's so many variables that come into play. Seasonal trends, media trends specifically are very influential. So it's when you engage in a process of testing, it is a process and it should be ongoing. It's one of those things where if you look at something in a silo, you're not going to get the whole picture. So it's, again, really important to kind of build in testing as part of your business operation, so to speak. Without doing it, you're kind of just sampling, and sampling doesn't tell the whole story. And I think if I really want to make significant improvements, it's the only way to kind of build that into the day-to-day work that we do as internet professionals.
One thing I would add to it, and this might be a little bit rudimentary for some, but I'd recommend it based on experience we see time and again, is to do it very incrementally. When folks are making changes, if you do a big bang, lots of changes all at once, it's difficult to go back and point at the factor that correlated with the increase or change, whatever it may be. When you do it incrementally, when you tweak, you see how that goes, you test and learn incrementally. We see great results, and one of the experiences we had at Magento, which I thought was interesting, is as we have tweaked and changed things, testing and learning as we go, we once changed one of our primary call to actions on our site, which is to request a demo. We changed the color of the button from red to green and saw a 20% increase in conversion just from doing that. Sometimes it's strange, but it is just the nature of it. But if we had made lots of changes at once, I don't know that we would have gone back and pointed to something as small as just changing the color of the button to have produced such a great result.
Great. Well, we talked about the process and we talked about the importance of testing incrementally. We have a great example of that from a MarketingSherpa case study. This is Thomas Mender, who spoke at Email Summit, and he had attended a previous Email Summit, was very interested in testing, had to figure a way to bring it back to Whirlpool, which is a big, complex organization, lots of agencies. So we see here, this was his previous process, right? The agency built that email, they had to get it out right away, and they sent it. So, as you talk about, Pete, he had to change that process, right? And so this is what he ended up changing the process to. It became more circular, right? They built in that time to work with the agency to get an understanding of what they wanted to test, not just what they were guessing worked. And then they, instead of giving the agency a creative brief of here's what you should do, they gave a creative brief of here's what we want to know, here's what we want to learn about the customer. So then they would learn that about the customer, they would know something new, then they would have more questions and they would test again. And as we're getting to traffic source in just a minute, I'm going to show you how he very smartly did it incrementally, because a big company like Whirlpool, or really any company working with lots of different agencies, you don't want to upset the apple cart right at once. But to set that up, let's take a look at traffic sources. And as we look at the channels that drive significant traffic, we see here for the higher revenue companies, email was a major traffic driver. And Ben, you were saying earlier, yes, email works, but don't go too far. Don't let email own the site. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's a good point. So it isn't surprising to us and probably to most people who are listening to this webinar to hear that email and search, organic search, are the two top channels in marketing. No surprise there. But I think we would classify that as having the approach of last touch attribution. And by that we mean you're giving credit not to the channel that necessarily stimulated the demand, you're giving the credit to the channel that brought you the sale. And that's great. We get that. Email drives a lot of traffic, and I was even thinking about an example from a customer called Nova Natural, who just did some, added an email marketing platform, and just by doing remailing, they were able to increase revenues by 100%. So we hear stories like this all the time of tremendous success. But it isn't the full answer, and the more you go down this path of really banking on this channel, I think you start to narrow what you can do with your site and your business. A great example of this is, think about all the times that any of us have gone to sites, you're expecting the site, and instead a little box pops up even before you get to the home page, which is the little email newsletter interstitial in order to get your email address so they can add you to their big list to start marketing to you. It feels a little like, to some extent, they have stopped looking at their website as a primary tool for conversion and really as a way to create a major email marketing strategy. So it is a good thing to do it. We see lots of success, but you don't want to go too far and forget about these other channels, which can really build out a really successful portfolio in a strategy.
Yeah, not really thinking about the customer, right? What does the customer want when they get to the website? How can I build my list? So I'm glad you talked about last touch attribution. I want to build on that a little, make sure the audience understands. So last touch attribution is essentially that companies are giving the entire credit to that sale, or whatever that conversion is, to the last touch that drove them to that conversion. And I think this is a great example of the challenge we have when we have numbers sometimes and a little bit of analytics, so we overemphasize it.
Right.
And so one challenge with that is, sure, we say email really drove that sale, but we don't know what we used to call marketing air cover, or other things we're doing, branding, content marketing, which is very difficult to measure.
The touch points all along that brought them to that point.
Exactly, and then they got that email and they said, oh yeah, I've been hearing from this company, I want to actually purchase something. Another important topic with email is frequency. So we were talking about this earlier, Peter. What would you advise some marketers about setting the frequency of their email?
Well, I think there's a couple ways you can, any marketer can look at this. Again, I think it starts with the strategy, understanding your customer a little bit, and who they are and what they kind of expect from the brands that they engage with. The second big part of that is these are all testable moments, right? And when I say testable moments, I mean you don't know unless you actually go out and do these things, like pop-up windows to get an email, right? Does that resonate with your audience? Does that work? Can we attribute that to ultimately to a conversion? It's very important. So there's a lot of measurement with email. It's infinitely trackable, like a lot of other things. So you really have to have a firm understanding of who your audience is and what their expectation is. I think one of the easiest things people can do is give people that option. How often do you want this, and in what format? It seems like a small thing, but most of the email service providers provide that functionality. From list track to constant contact to get response. All these guys provide the functionality to let the user choose. And when it's on their own terms, they're simply more likely to convert. And the last attribution is really, really important, and to understand where they are in this now omni-channel experience. But you don't want to push aside email for social or search if it's the thing that actually triggers the conversion. So again, a really good understanding of what's happening on your site and within the minds of your consumers, best practice.
Yeah, and perhaps not even just the timing, but also asking customers, what do you want to hear from us?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Segmenting that, because for one product, we may have different personas, different types of customers that might want very different things. Like perhaps a parent or an older child might want very different things about a specific product. So talking about testing, here's building more on the Whirlpool story of Thomas Mender. Ben, you were saying test incrementally, and when Ben decided he wanted to test, that's what he did. He went back and they had a send that was almost ready to go. It had several calls to actions, so he just wanted to make one change, just one minor change, said let's just move to one call to action. Got everyone on board, got the agency on board, got everyone in his team on board. What they found out is they got a 42% increase in click-through. Actually, you can see they segment very well, so you can even see how that increase went across their different segments. But again, that's a great example of one small change, really just questioning their overall process and seeing what impact it could have. And then from that, this also helped him build a case, right, to test deeper into the company. So and let's also look at the lower revenue companies. We found organic search was a major driver there. So organic search, content is a major factor of search, and I know that's an expertise of yours. So what should we be producing in our content to get better search results, more traffic?
I think, again, it goes back to the customer. I think a couple of years ago, Coca-Cola bought upwards of 50 domains and started marketing content to their consumers over a very wide range of products, right? And what that enabled them to do is not only speak directly to the customer, but kind of penetrate the big search engines, right, with content that was appealing to their audience, and that raised brand awareness. I don't know if it raised sales or not, but really I think that's what we should really aim for as marketers, is putting content that's useful, educational, informational, or entertaining in front of the people that are ultimately going to buy our products or services. When you don't do that, you don't penetrate, you don't have that opportunity. And if you don't have that opportunity, it's like showing up to the baseball park without a bat, right? You're never going to hit a homer unless you show up with, prepared. And I think that's where it starts.
Yeah, I think why it's such a big opportunity too for some of the lower revenue companies is some of those lower revenue industries are not doing it as well. So I think it's Marcus Sheridan from River Pools and Spas. He did it so well that he's now known as a sales line, and he teaches about how to do it. But he spoke at one of our optimization summits a few years ago, and basically what he did, he just sat down and he said, what are the top 50 questions I get from customers about pools? And he just started answering them on a blog. And it was even questions that sometimes we feel a little nervous to answer, like about price, or about when perhaps they should choose a different type of pool that he didn't sell, a pool from their competitor. But he got huge results. And he went from having to go and really sell at each of the appointments he set up to just going and signing contracts, because all of that content he created up to that point, people came in from search when they were looking for pools, right?
It's a terrifically smart idea in the sense that we're really, starting to think of customer first, right? And I think once you start doing that, you start revealing all this really useful information. There's no dumb questions, right? Like as marketers, we get very myopic. We think, oh, we understand, we did the test, we understand completely what our users want, but those things are dynamic, they change. People's feelings and emotions and living situations change. So you really have to, evolve with it.
So got just a few minutes left, and in just a moment I'm going to ask each of you, what are your top takeaways for e-commerce companies, for e-commerce marketers in general? Either what you're learning here at IRCE or what you've learned from talking to customers and interviewing. Just one last reminder, we got a question here about the free benchmark study. You can go to marketingsherpa.com/ECOMM, marketingsherpa.com/ecom to get your copy of that benchmark study. Again, educational funding was provided by Magento, which is an eBay company. So again, what's your biggest takeaway for e-commerce companies?
It's that success is really being focused on your customer, understanding your customer, and then picking the right channels to optimally get to your customer. To the extent that you understand them, and then use these channels effectively to market to them, you can have tremendous success. I think one of my favorite examples of this is Alex and Ani, a brand that is just growing explosively right now. And they use content marketing well, they use affiliate marketing extremely well, even though it's one of the ones that's lower here, in addition to some of the other channels that are very established and successful. So it's having that right portfolio to optimally get to your target prospect and customer and demonstrating that you really understand what they need.
What about for you, Pete?
Well, I think it's, there's no test too small is what I'm taking away from IRCE this year. There's lots of opportunities to improve our websites, improve the conversion, expand our presence in search or social, but you have to engage in those tests. And there's no test too small. So I encourage everybody, kind of attending the webinar today to actually take those steps to test personalization and to, try new things in social and to try that pop-up box maybe. You never know, because you never know what's going to be the tipping point, and you have to be courageous and actually go out there and do it.
I love what both of you said, because testing not only forces you to focus on thinking like the customer, okay, how might they act in this situation? Because you essentially have to form a hypothesis.
Right.
Why might this work? Why might that work? But also you end up learning about the customer and finding out what works best for them. Well, thank you very much. We have Brent Pressley, Head of Sales for Magento, and Peter Prestipino, Editor-in-Chief for Website Magazine, and thank you for tuning in. As we said, we're here at the Marketing Sherpa Media Center for the next few days. You can go to marketingsherpa.com/IRCE to see many more interviews and help you improve your own e-commerce sites.